That gives us a sort of concrete example that we could maybe throw out to the rest of the panel. I mean, Ryad, listening to that, do you think, yeah, well, that's the kind of, exactly that big agriculture-based example there that Makar was laying out, that's the right direction, that's the prism through which investors might, warm up to Ukraine? Or do you think that is actually, just something that is just so ambitious and take years? If it ever happens, it'd be better off doing smaller steps?
No, I would actually echo Makar's comment to quite a few extent, but let me expand on the three types of investors that are present in Ukraine. And I think this segmentation is important just to explain, to come back to Makar's point. So there's basically a Eurobond investor, people who come and buy fixed income for Ukraine. There's the local currency investors, people who will come and invest into the UAH government bond market. And then there's the, what I would call FDI, or people investing into real assets in the country, so setting up factories, buying land, etc. The first category of investors are very fickle, the ficklest of the three, because they can easily exit within a moment's notice. And at a country like Ukraine, where your debt burden is so high, and the bond is a number 14 on the emerging markets bond index, you're very, very reliant on what's happening in emerging markets as a whole. So Ukraine could be the best country in the world, but given you're a part of the EMBI index, just the way people invest, stuff will go in and out. That will be outside of Ukraine's control. So in a scenario where there's a global downturn in the emerging markets as a whole, people will just fly out of that bond, and which would be very difficult for the Ministry of Finance to refinance your debt. So that's category one. All this reform stuff we're talking about, they don't care. Like they really don't watch it. Land reform, corruption, they're not worried about it. They're just simply worried about what's emerging markets doing. So that's $14 billion, that's a lot. Second is the domestic market, domestic investment, domestic bond market, which in Ukraine is very, very small. The central bank is not here anymore, but a kudos to them, because the changes that they made in terms of liberalizing the currency market, going to an inflation targeting, and particularly listing the bonds in the clear stream was a massive step towards opening that market to foreign investors. So from Goldman Sachs, we can say that we're coming onshore to try to trade this bond and make markets, which really means that a lot of capital which could only invest into Ukraine in the bond market, the international bond market, will now look at this market as a way of getting in. And just to use a concrete example, Egypt, which did this process about 2-3 years ago, just from our hands, there was $20 billion worth of cash went into that market, which diversifies away from this fickle money that's in the Eurobonds into the local domestic market, which is a huge, huge boost. They also don't care about the reforms. This group of investors, they particularly care about the central bank and the Ministry of Finance activities. It's the last bucket, which is the third bucket, the foreign direct investment, where Makar's point comes into play, because there, Ukraine ultimately is a very, very large portion of the economy is agriculture. So people, when they think about investing into this country, they clearly are going to look at either commodities or agriculture or something else. And there, you have made some strides in the corruption side. So ease of doing business is an index that the World Bank puts together, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, Ukraine was 104 before, and the last couple of years they've come to 74. Now, 74 is better, but there's some ways to go there on that front. So there's a few steps that I think the government is looking at to improve that. Land reform. I mean, if you're going to go into agriculture, clearly you have to enable the agricultural company to be able to raise credit. If the owner of the land cannot sell or pledge their land, the banks or international markets will not provide you credit. If you don't have credit, you will not invest into the agricultural sector. And if it's 15% of the GDP, that will be stuck at 15% of the GDP. So, and then there's a few others. So what I would say is that while the IMF is in town, because I think you've got hopefully 2 more years, and hopefully the political cycle allows the IMF to continue with this program, notwithstanding your concerns. It's the third bucket that the Ukrainian government really needs to think about and ask investors, and again, that dialogue is important. What do you need?